One huge aspect of Super Mario Bros. That sets itself apart from any other video game franchise are its multitude of unique enemies that really bring the world of the Mushroom Kingdom to life. In today's video, I specifically want to look at the best and worst from across the entire series, judging the baddies based on their appearance, annoyingness, usefulness, and rememberability, explaining why they need to be showcased in either category. Before I get started with this absolutely massive endeavor, my name is Copycat, and if you haven't yet, then please subscribe to my channel, hitting that bell button to stay notified when I upload new videos. Starting things off is the first home console game to be released in the franchise in Super Mario Bros. For the NES, which has one iconic enemy that I immediately want to mention on the best side of things in the Koopa Troopas. This turtle-like bad guy can be stomped on to force it inside its shell, where that shell can then be shot along the ground if you hit it in that direction. This is very useful as you can use them to clear a large amount of enemies at once, but be careful as it can ricochet and still deal damage to you. Another enemy that I love from this entry, and really from across the entire series, are the Bullet Bills, who are sentient projectiles that are fired out of cannons towards you. Unfortunately, in this game, they don't do much other than wanting to kill you, but in more recent entries, you can at least use them as a platform to get up to higher areas. I'd have to say that the squid-like bloober is the worst enemy in the game, mainly because they only appear in the incredibly annoying underwater levels. On top of this, the bloober moves rather erratically, so avoiding it while also dodging the Cheep Cheeps can be pretty tough, especially if you don't have a fire flower to aid you. Another enemy I absolutely despised growing up was the Hammer Bros, as avoiding their attacks and transitions between platforms is no easy task. Again, if you aren't powered up in Fire Mario form to face off against these foes, you're guaranteed to have tons of trouble, even for experienced players as myself, as they seem so unpredictable. The second entry of the series is Super Mario Bros. 2, where I'd have to say that the best enemy hands down is the incredibly strange Auto Bomb. Now, this specific title has very different enemies than what we usually see in the series, as it's actually a completely different title in Japan, called Yumi Kojo Doki Doki Panic, which was reskinned and changed for Western markets as the true sequel was deemed too hard and too similar to the original. The Auto Bomb is a prime example of this differentness, as it's a moving cannon that sometimes is ridden by a Shy Guy, showing up only in World 4-1 and 4-2. In one section of 4-2, you actually have to ride on top of one to traverse through a hallway of spikes, but unfortunately you can't fire projectiles out of it, which would have been a nice touch. One enemy that looks absolutely goofy, but I love it for it, is the Ostro, an ostrich-like creature found throughout Worlds 3 and 5. These birds can be ridden on that let the player get by certain obstacles, or can be picked up and thrown as a projectile. Either way, I love it, and I hope that one day it makes a return to the series. On the bad enemy side of things, I have to showcase the whale from World 4-2, as most people online absolutely loathe it. I guess because they find it too difficult to use its water spouts that allow you to get up to higher platforms. I never really found this one too bad, and even thought it was cool, but I guess a lot of people hate this feature, and therefore I have to mention it as bad. Now, the only enemy I really hate from this game are the Sparks, that are electrical balls of energy that travel along walls and ceilings and platforms that can easily deal you damage. Out of any creature in this title, this one has definitely killed me the most, as they're laid out in certain places that require extremely tight platforming, so there's almost no way of not colliding with them at least a few times. The final entry of the original trilogy is Super Mario Bros. 3, where some of my favorite enemies are found in World 4, otherwise known as Giant Land. As the name suggests, the enemies that you can find here are absolutely enormous, and that makes things hilarious, as it's a great change of pace from the regular gameplay. Another amazing enemy that I have to mention is the Shoe Goomba, who travels around the stage in a jumpy shoe. Those Goombas can be completely removed and you can take over the shoe for yourself, which is a very helpful item as it allows you to walk on surfaces that would usually cause you damage. Now, there's one enemy I have to mention that's very divisive and can fit really right in the middle of these two sides in this video in the Angry Sun, which only shows up in World 2 Desert and World 8-2. On one hand, this is a pretty cool foe, as it's very shocking when you first come across it, But on the other hand, it can be annoying as it periodically swoops down from the heavens trying to damage you. I'm on the side of liking this enemy, but I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. The only enemy that I can confidently say is bad in this game is the Pile Driver Micro Goomba, who are disguised as bricks. They of course love to hide near other bricks and only reveal themselves when you get near, jumping high up in the air, then driving down on Mario, per their name. I think it's their unpredictability that makes them so bad, and even to this day I still find myself getting damaged by them. Super Mario Land for the Game Boy is the first handheld game in the series, where I'd have to say one of the best enemies from it is the Mecca Bond. This robotic baddie throws her head towards you and regenerates if you stomp on it. I think I just love this enemy as it's very different and has a cool mechanic that's really unique to this quite simple game. The only other ones I want to mention on the best side of things are the Batadon, Toko Toko, and Hyoinoi, all found in the game's Eastern Kingdom. This is because they resemble the Moai statues that are found on Easter Island, which is an amazing detail that really brings life to this title. One enemy that I absolutely hate is the Pyonpi, which is only found in the Chai Kingdom, as it seems to always get in your way and damage you during your playthrough. That's probably because they jump towards Mario pretty quickly and erratically, and stomping on them only briefly stuns them. It doesn't actually kill them. This is what makes them so tough to get around, as 2 fireballs is the only way to defeat them, but good luck maintaining that power up for this long. The Kumo and Sue Spiders are another terrible enemy that I want to look at, as the combination of the two can really cause you some problems when trying to platform in World 3 too. I've lost dozens of lives to these 2 enemies, plus they are both spiders, which I can't really say I love in real life, so there's also that. The next game in the series is Super Mario World, which was released for the SNES in 1991. Where I'd actually have to say that the Lakitu of all enemies is one of the game's best. That's because this version of the baddie lets you ride in its cloud once you kill it, letting you bypass a small section of the level that you're in, which is a very useful change. Another enemy that's a shoo-in on the best side of things is Rip Van Fish, as its name and appearance are incredibly spectacular. His name is actually based on a short story called Rip Van Winkle by Washington Irving, which is about a man who falls asleep on a mountainside and wakes up 30 years later to discover that things have drastically changed. Now, I don't think that this fish is going through a situation that serious, but he is at least asleep, so I guess that's where they got the name from, sorta weird. An enemy from this game that always annoys me as it's really hard to dodge is the Boo Crew, which are dozens of the ghost baddie that can be found in the Donut Ghost House. These boos totally get in your way during this level, and switch between transparent and solid, swooping down to attack you. There isn't really another enemy that I hated in this one, but let me know the one that you didn't like in the comments below. The sequel to the Game Boy's Super Mario Land was released in 1992, and has one of the coolest enemies I've ever seen in the series in the Kyuras, aka vampires. This astounding foe even sends out small bats to attack Mario, but can be easily defeated by a stomp or fireball. Another great horror-based enemy that's found in this game are the masked ghouls, who are essentially the mask of Jason from Friday the 13th, with a machete sticking out through its head. This is actually pretty morbid and really unexpected from Nintendo, but I guess one of their designers was a horror movie fan, because otherwise this doesn't make sense. The only enemies I could even think putting in the worst category are the bees, that all have different ways in wanting to hurt you. There's the regular bee that hones in on Mario trying to sting him, there's the big bee that drops down like a thwomp trying to crush Mario, and the skeleton bee that actually comes back to life when stomped on. Maybe I just have a dislike for insects and bugs, but I don't know. The first game with 3D graphics in the series is Super Mario 64 for the N64. Where one of the best enemies by a long shot is the Mad Piano, found in the Big Boo's Haunt course. This inanimate object comes to life and tries to chomp you to death when you get near it. Not something I expected at all when I first played this game. This really brought this particular level a lot of character, and along with the biting bookends and flying chairs, brings in a really spooky feel. One enemy that deserves to be on the best side of things in this video, due to its unique function, is the Moneybags. Found only in Snowman's Land. Appearing in disguise as a coin, it actually turns into its true form when approached, and releases 5 coins from its purse when you stomp on it and kill it. It's sort of random that it debuted this way in this title, but would become a series staple and extremely more useful in future titles. The last enemy from the good side of things I want to mention is the Chain Chomp, found chained to a wooden stake in Bob-omb Battlefield. Facing off against this enemy back in the day felt like such a daunting task, as it lunges quickly towards you, trying to body slam Mario with its full force. Nowadays, it seems a lot easier to release it from its shackles, but it doesn't mean I enjoy it any less. Easily, I can put the bully enemies in the worst category, as to this day I still have trouble defeating them, as they always seem to have the upper hand in bumping you around. Appearing only in the Lethal Lava Land course, these devil horn bowling ball creatures just have an evil look to them, like they want nothing but to see you touch the lava, and half the time, that turns out to be the case. Another enemy that I despise and needs to be talked about as bad is the Heave Hose, as they fling Mario up in the air, sometimes helping you get to a higher platform, but most of the time just causing you to fall and take damage. Even though the concept and mechanics are cool, I just feel like the poor camera and tough controls really soured my experience with this foe. Up next is Super Mario Sunshine for the Gamecube, where hands down one of the greatest enemies of the game are the Poinks, who are balloon-like pig creatures found in a few areas around Delfino Isle. These Poinks are actually pretty useful, as they attach to your FLUDD and can be shot towards other enemies like rockets to deal damage. The Sleeping Boo is the only other enemy I want to show off in this category, as it looks incredibly nutty, with a string of drool hanging out of their mouths. This Boo never ever wakes up and acts more like an obstacle than anything else, but it really is still amazing based off its design alone. I think pretty much anyone who's played this entry will agree that the Catacques are some of the worst / annoying baddies in the entire game, as when you come in contact with them, they send you flying up in the air. The red ones in particular are bad, as they launch you up in the air, and when you land, actually force you to take damage, making them very deadly if you traverse the wrong way around them. The Swipe and Stew is the only other enemy I need to talk about, as you conceal your hat, which I honestly just felt like was an annoying feature. If you're without your hat for too long, then you'll eventually take damage for the sun and burn to death, making this enemy even worse. Nintendo would return the series to its 2D roots with new Super Mario Bros. For the DS, but brought in a few new baddies that are really cool, starting with the Balloon Boos. Maybe I just like this version of the ghost because it looks so silly, having the mechanic of inhaling air when you're facing it, and shrinking in size when you look away. Unfortunately, it only shows up in the World 4 Ghost House, and even though it can be tough to get past, I wish it made more appearances in this title. The only other enemy I can think of as being good in this title is the Unagi, which is a gigantic eel that swims back and forth in a few of the underwater levels. I think it's all about this creature's shocking size, which is why it's such a fun time when you come across it, as usually I never include something as good from an underwater level, but here we are. I guess while we're on the subject of those type of stages, then I can mention one of the worst enemies of the game in the Spike Bass, a giant fish with spikes that comes out of the water and jumps at you. Even if you find a way to defeat this foe, it will respawn after a few seconds and will continue to attack you, which is just annoying to be honest. If you've been watching a few of my past videos, then you know that World 8-8 is one of my least favorite levels of the game, mainly due to two enemies, the volcanic debris that rains down from the sky, and the Kabomb, which explodes when touched by said volcanic debris. The combination of the two baddies makes this level agonizing to complete, and I really can't even guess how many times I must have died here. In Super Mario Galaxy that was released for the Wii in 2007, there's one really cool variation of a series regular enemy I want to mention in the Bomb Boo. This much more volatile version of the baddie doesn't shy away when Mario faces it, and can actually be grabbed by the tongue by spinning when you're up close to it. It's in this state where it can be hit into other objects, which causes it to explode on impact, destroying whatever it touches. This is such a different concept for the enemy that surprisingly works well in this game. One enemy that's very similar to the money bags but gives you star bits instead of coins are the Tracks, who are invisible but can be found by looking at their footsteps. This is a cool enemy that honestly I can't say I even knew about, as I guess I just never came across them during my playthrough. I mean, they are invisible, so that makes sense. In terms of bad enemies, I definitely have to put the Cluck Booms at the top of that list, as they are annoying flying robotic chickens that drop endless amounts of bombs at you. Maybe I just have a hatred for the terrible sounds it makes, or their ugly look, but either way, I dislike them very, very, very much. I really did have trouble picking another bad enemy from Super Mario Galaxy, so once again, I'd love to know what you think in the comments below. The next game in the new Super Mario Bros. Sub-series was released for the Wii in 2009, and has one enemy that's an immediate standout in the humongous King Bills. Facing off against these enemies in World 9-8 is an absolute treat, as they take up literally the majority of the screen, so having to platform around them is a unique experience. Maybe I'm a sucker for gigantic versions of bad guys, I don't know, but there's definitely something special about encountering these ones. The Foo is another enemy I want to show you guys, as it has the very unusual ability of being able to create a layer of fog to obstruct your view of the stage. This is very different than what the Foos are known for in the later entries, something I'll explain more in depth later in this video. One enemy that always annoys me as it shows up in really inconvenient spots in World 9-7 are the prickly Goombas, which are just regular old Goombas wearing a spiked chestnut shell, meaning they can't be stomped on. This really is a huge pain if you don't have a fire flower, as your only option is to avoid them, which is rough, especially as the stage is covered in ice blocks. The only other bad enemies I want to mention are the Fuzzies, which are baddies honestly I never really liked at all in any game of the series, as they always tend to get in your way while platforming. On top of that, you really can't stomp on them, so avoiding them is the only thing you can do at the end of the day. Probably my favorite game in the entire franchise is Super Mario Galaxy 2, which contains a really interesting enemy in the Cosmic Clone, a dark entity in the form of Mario that chases you around certain galaxies. This, however, isn't any normal chase down, as this shadow mimics literally every move you just made, meaning you have to be careful how you platform, as crossing paths with it will definitely deal you damage. I remember when I first encountered this enemy and was actually frightened by it, something that doesn't happen that often to me in Mario games. The only other enemy I want to mention on the good side of things is the Mattermouths, as they have a very special ability that sets them apart from every other foe. That's because they can actually eat the ground they're traveling on, leaving an empty space behind them that Mario can actually fall into if you aren't careful. One enemy that I hate from this entry only because it looks so stupid are the Snoodles, which are giant tube-like worms found in most underwater caves. These annoying creatures protrude from their holes in the seafloor and extend their heads towards Mario, trying to damage you. I know this definitely isn't the worst enemy you'll see in this video, but there's just something about its face that I just find off. One very cool aspect about certain enemies in Super Mario 3D Land is that a few of them have tailed versions of themselves, meaning it seems like they've somehow powered up with a super leaf. This not only gives them the ability to float around a bit while traveling through the air, but they can also tail whip Mario if you get too close to them, making it actually a more difficult encounter than their regular variants. This is a great addition to the game that actually doesn't feel extremely gimmicky, like a few that we'll see later in this video. One enemy that can be annoying at times, but I actually think is pretty decent due to its abilities, is the Wallop, which is a thwomp-like stone creature with a really goofy look on its face. This Wallop actually mimics your movements, blocking your path, where the only way to get by it is to make it jump, which briefly puts it out of its position. I think I might have put this one in my annoying enemies video, but that doesn't mean that it isn't good. Now, one enemy that's definitely bad and needs to be shown are the Blocka Blocks, who are snake-like creatures composed of a series of blocks and spikes. Honestly, don't even try to hit one of these question mark blocks it's made of, as it's just a waste of time and will probably deal you damage, so now I really just avoid them whenever I see them. Another foe that would give me tons of grief during my playthroughs are the spiked eels, found in a few of the game's underwater levels. These eels are so enormous that they actually block entire pathways during certain sections of these stages, where really the only way to kill them is to hit them 15 times with a fire flower, or if you turn invincible using the star. One really positive aspect of New Super Mario Bros. 2 are the addition of the bone enemies that are much harder versions to face off against than their regular selves. These skeleton creatures are a pain to kill, as they aren't affected by fireballs and instead have to be stomped on multiple times or attacked with Raccoon Mario's tail. I like this theme as it at least makes things tougher in this already extremely easy game. On the opposite end of things, one type of enemy that almost ruins the playthroughs for me are the gold ones, which instead of throwing projectiles or dealing damage to you, they spread out coins, which honestly is just a bit strange. This really sucks out any risk associated with these enemies and turns them into gimmicky versions of themselves, which is unfortunate because making things easy really sucks out the fun and makes it boring. The final entry in the new Super Mario Bros. Sub-series was released for the Wii U in 2012, and has one great enemy I need to mention in the Waddle Wings, which are adorable squirrel-like creatures. These appear right away in the first level of the game and drop the Acorn power-up, this game's version of the Super Leaf that allows Mario to glide long distances in a stage. They're really not too crazy, and it's just a simple, nice mechanic that comes from such a cute creature. The Dragon Eels are another enemy I want to look at as one of the game's best, as they are gigantic sea creatures found in the Dragon Eels Undersea Grotto stage. These insane foes can only be defeated by a superstar power-up, meaning that you can only really maneuver around and avoid taking damage from them. In running this video, I realized that I've added so many underwater creatures on the good side of things, which is definitely strange as I usually dislike those levels. I guess maybe I am just being a hater, and I should look more into these underwater stages in the future, but just a note for you guys and me. One enemy I'm gonna hate on, strictly because of their appearance, are the Goombrats, who are evil looking Goombas found throughout this title. This very punchable looking enemy just annoys me a lot for some reason. I think it's its smug looking smile, but I'm not too sure. Up next, we're gonna look at the best enemies from Super Mario 3D World, where I definitely have to include the cat form versions of some of the regular foes. Seemingly being powered up by a Super Bell, most of these just give the enemies cat ears and a tail, which honestly is kind of funny, but a few do lunge towards you, so their attacks are changed a bit. Another very fun enemy that needs to be mentioned are the skating Goombas, who are found traversing around in just that in a few of the game's icy levels. These Goombas can be removed from these skates, allowing you to enter them yourself, which is just amazing, letting you travel around for a bit in this weird vehicle state. One enemy that definitely can be considered as bad is the Grumplump, which is a sentient platform that rolls around in the lava of Grumplump Inferno. When I first played this stage, I never could quite figure out how to properly maneuver on the strange foe, as I would try to jump and at times would get thrown off into the lava. What you actually need to do is walk slowly on its sides, as indicated by the skip squeaks at the beginning of the level. Either way, it's still really tough to complete this stage, and it's an annoying foe altogether. The only other baddie I want to mention are the Conkdors, which are bird-like enemies with long necks that slam their beaks into the ground towards Mario. For some reason, I struggled to platform around these dumb enemies, and maybe I should have put the Charvars or Walleyes in this spot instead, but oh well, I'm going with this. One very interesting thing about Super Mario Odyssey is the capture mechanic, that allows you to become certain enemies using their specific abilities to your advantage. There are so many great ones from this entry that I have to just list them off quickly. And this includes the Gushin that allows you to spray water out, letting you travel either horizontally or vertically in midair. The bird-like Pokio that lets you puncture its beak into certain walls, where you can then fling yourself upwards. The T-Rex, which is obviously cool, I don't really have to explain that one. The Tropical Wriggler that allows you to extend and retract its body. The Bullet Bill that lets you crash into objects at high speeds. The Charging Chucks that allow you to body slam into objects at high speeds. The Cheap Sheeps that let you swim around in water. The Hammer Bros that let you throw objects wherever you please. And the Typhoos that are clouds that allow you to blow gusts of wind. Honestly, there's so many more I probably could have included, but this is already almost a half-an-hour video, so I have to move on. One enemy that you can't actually capture and is a definite pain are the Burbos, that show up in a few of the game's kingdoms. The foe is covered in tiny bristles that deal damage if you jump on them, and this gets really annoying during the moving platform section of A Long Journey's End, as they are seriously tough to avoid. The only other enemy I want to mention on the worst side are the Chinchos, which are zombie-like enemies that spawn from the ground and try to attack you. They are the most strenuous during the Knucklotech rematch in the depths of the Sand Kingdom, as they spawn in hordes and really get in your way when you're trying to defeat this boss's hands. The final game we're going to look at in this video is Bowser's Fury, which is a game mode that was included with the re-release of Super Mario 3D World for the Switch, where the only types of new great enemies I want to mention are the catified ones. Now, this isn't the same as the cat-powered enemies that we saw earlier in the video, and are literally just regular Mario enemies with cute cat-like features, as this is Lake Lapcat, of course. Now, the only bad enemy from this game I want to mention are the Fury Shadows, that are goopy creatures that resemble Luigi that are found around the game's areas. These shadows need to be chased down to gain a cat shine, which isn't too hard of a task, but in terms of enemies is the only slightly bad new one. Alright, that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this one. If you did, please leave a like, comment below what you thought about it, and of course subscribe to my channel. Also, please follow my Instagram at CopyCatGamer. There I upload some cool clips and items from my collection that you won't see anywhere else. Hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!